So I'm Kristin Lennarz. Nice to be here this morning. Thanks for the nice introduction, Molly. I'm going to talk about the customer journey. It's something that I'm very, very interested in. I think we should all be interested in it. I'm going to start off with just a little tiny piece of trivia and then kind of move into the why, what, who, how, when, roadmap, etc. So I did this with my MBA class last week, a little piece of trivia. Going to just date myself for you and all of Facebook Live. I was in the first Columbia Business School Internet Marketing course. Can anybody guess what my team's project was? That was back in 1995. Let me go over my glasses. It's kind of relevant to Journey. Okay, we'll move on because we don't have a lot of time. Oh my gosh, it was an online travel agency. Isn't that amazing? What a great concept. So I thought, wow, this could be really fun. Except the next year Travelocity launched, and we never really got that idea from our group project off the ground. But that was okay, because instead of launching whatever the next Travelocity would be, I joined Colgate-Palmolive. And it was at a really interesting time, and in fact I joked with the students, I almost felt like the Forrest Gump of digital, because just sort of happened to be in the right places at the right times. Colgate-Palmolive was just getting going on its digital marketing, and things like websites, e-commerce, email, and I'm doing little air quotes, banner ads, were just starting to take off. It was a scary time for traditional marketers because you had TV, print, and radio, and it was pretty simple, and it started to get a little more complex. And then the exciting part, and Molly actually brought it up, was around 2003. I had moved into the digital marketing, the new digital marketing department at Colgate, and was trying to convince marketers that you could do branding online with digital. At the time, it was just kind of believed you would sell online. And the VP of marketing said, you can do a little test, but just know that if it fails, you're never getting any money for digital. And we were part of one of the really early cross-media studies that showed when you put TV, print, radio, and internet together, with internet as part of the mix, the whole performs greater than the sum of the offline parts. It was very successful, and instead of losing all our funding for digital, we got a lot more funding. So that was one of my, career highs there at Colgate. And the VP of digital advertising, put this out in the press, but the things that I like, way back then even, it was, and as a lead marketer, we have to harness the internet's potential to connect with our customers to influence purchasing. So my first foray into marketing, I'm already putting together, we have a lot of different ways to connect with the consumer. How can we influence that purchase? And that kind of just stayed there, percolated. Anybody else love Marketunist? Okay. So marketing was supposed to be simple. I borrowed this from my esteemed colleague, Professor Nelson, perhaps without permission. But marketing was supposed to be performance of all business activities that direct the flow of goods or services from the producer to the consumer. I like that second bullet a lot better, consumer-focused business activities, right? We're getting closer. Wow, so simple, right? Mm-hmm. So we went from, back in 2003, we had, it was really complex. We had email, the website, and our banner ads, and maybe some search, and all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but over the span of 15 years, things got really crazy. So, marketing. And obviously what changed, I'm going to do the history of the internet in like 2 minutes. What changed is just the proliferation of technology and how it really changed things. We went from this, and I'm not that old, just for the record, to this. And you've probably all seen those presentations where they say the internet put the consumer in control, and mobile put remote control in their hands, and I think it was part of every marketing presentation I've done in the last 10 years. But there was a real impact of technology and the changes that technology brought on consumer behavior. It really changed the way marketers got to market. We went from being able to just do our thing and put it out there, right? It was mass media, it was one to many. You're blasting one way, shouting, telling, time-bound, appointment TV, very tethered to your device, to the complete opposite, right? Personalized one-to-one, multilateral, listening, discussing. It was pull versus push, always on, mobile, and you go from having the passive consumer to the very engaged, interactive consumer. So back then, you had kind of fewer of everything and the marketer was more in control. And now, there's just so much more. So much more. There are more companies, more brands. I mean, the internet has sort of leveled the playing field. More media vehicles, ads, ad formats, ad variations, technologies, options, and so consumers more in control. So there's the marketer. They're programmers, they're time shifters, they create, curate, publish their own content. Search was a real game changer, right? Because they could really compare and contrast marketers' offerings, compare and get the best deal, and then review, right, and amplify whether it's good or bad. So customer expectations, the consumer behavior changed as well, right? We've all become accustomed to getting ads that are perfect for us, seamless experiences, immediate service 24/7. And so how should marketing adapt, right, to the fact that the consumer has a lot of control? That whole inside-out, outside-in thinking, thinking customer first, and I'm sure all of you are already aware that's a thing, but that change gives us opportunity, right? So the fact that there is all that technology and all that data, we now as marketers have more opportunity to be relevant and seamless and immediate using the technology. So the tide is starting to turn. And that's where the journey comes in. So if the customer experience has to be relevant, seamless, and right-timed, all who touch the customer have to shift from inside out to outside in thinking. And so this is the way we used to be, selling, telling the consumer, buy, buy, buy. And this is a Gartner model, the buy, own, advocate. It's their version of the journey. And you can see that buy is only a tiny piece of it, right? The marketer, the seller, now has to really consider the own and the advocate. So once they have your product, are you staying in touch with them? Are you supporting that experience? Are you making that experience a good one? And with the goal being getting them to advocate, right? So getting them to be an amplifier of your brand proposition. Because every contact we have with the customer influences whether or not they'll come back. We have to be great every time or we'll lose them. So it's not enough to lead the horse to water or make them drink. You have to make sure they've had enough to drink, that they're comfy, that they're moving on, that they're telling other horses about the water. And your website isn't the center of your universe. Your Facebook page isn't the center of your universe. Your mobile app is not the center of your universe. The customer is the center of your universe. So that was the super fast stampede to why you need to think about customer journey. There are so many more moments where you can connect with your customer. There are many different conceptual models for the customer journey. Has anyone seen any of these? Yep, the one on the left for sure, yeah. So the McKinsey loyalty loop was one of those earlier concepts to say it's not like a linear step through the funnel sort of process. It's more of a loop. then I worked with a client who had a model called LBGUBs. It's an attractive name. They were obviously really into marketing. Has anybody used that model? No. Has anybody done journey mapping? Okay, so I want to hear about those experiences. And then the Gartner model that I mentioned. So where I got really interested, because I kept seeing the conceptual models presented, and they made a lot of sense to me, but how do you do it? How do you use it? How do you make it actionable? And so I started to kind of look at how different people had done it. Gartner, kind of here showing where you could start to build out the tactics that would support the journey. But really what it came down to was everything that powers the journey. It wasn't really about the model, it was about what are you feeding into the model. And when I worked at Catalyst, I got to work on a really exciting project to actually do a journey map for a local regional bank, and digging in with the team, listening to the customers, setting up those groups, finding out what they were thinking, feeling, and doing as they stepped through the phases of their sort of path to purchase, was really interesting. And I'm just going to kind of quickly go through that approach, but it starts with outlining kind of what your phases are, what those customer touch points are, and kind of understanding their experiences, what they're thinking, feeling, doing at each one, mapping those out. And once you've done that, you can sort of start to see where the gaps are in those experiences. They become much clearer to you when you map them out. And then at the end, and this is the tricky part, is prioritizing the opportunities, because sometimes you'll find there are many opportunities. So the inputs, target. Most models will follow kind of a single target, so acquisition goal, then you'd have that new customer, whatever your persona is for that. You'd map out your stages. So some models only have a few, and then some have sort of many steps. The number that I've always seen at the conferences is like 5 to 7 stages of a journey. And then you map out the physical journey. And that one's pretty easy. What the customer's actually doing at each stage. They're watching a digital ad, then they're, logging on a line to do some research, then they're applying, then they're, and so on. And then mental and emotional journey, so that gets to the thinking and feeling at each stage. That's often unknown to the marketer and requires some research. I'm a big fan of the quick and dirty journey map. Certainly for smaller businesses, you can't afford to do the big thing that you would do if you were a Fortune 200. But there's there are many ways you can sort of get at this information and start to at least think along the lines of a journey. And then after you've laid all those out, you sort of net out with, well, first of all, you solve the issues that you would have, and then you identify the opportunities. And those opportunities can include, but are not limited to, changes to strategy, target, product, service, media, or message. And at the very end of all of that, you can kind of synthesize some guiding principles, some general themes that you can kind of go back up, sort of like you do the executive summary after you do the presentation. You get these themes that emerge out of your analysis here, and you can use those as your guiding principles. It'll make sense when you see the map. So here's the process that I just described, more or less, just broken down a little bit more. So identifying your customer target, outlining what the stages of their journey are, inventorying all the ways that they come in contact with you. What are those touch points? What are the triggers? What channels are they interacting with you in? Conduct consumer research. And then after you've listened to your consumers, you get together with your team, and you process that information, and you start to batch it in themes. So you can plot them on the map. You model their feelings. Were they happy when they were at this stage doing this thing with us? Were they frustrated? And you can start to cluster that. And then load it onto the map. And I will get there. Okay, simple audiences, I would say 1, but you can do 1 to 3. And there are the stages. This is just one example. Here's like an inventory map, so you can start to plot out all the different ways that you connect with them, that you can oh, sorry, I'm going to go back. And kind of early on, you can already start to see maybe where you're just missing a whole stage, where maybe you have nothing that connects with them. Often it'll be onboarding, really. Have to get new customers. Conduct the research. Lots of ways you can do that. Observe customers, interview customers, online surveys. That's an easy, quick, and dirty one, right? You can use Ask Your Target Market or SurveyMonkey pretty reasonably. Or you can do traditional online focus groups. The one that I was involved in did some online discussion boards, and that worked really well because you could get video. And that was really powerful at the end when you were trying to sell up. You can show this very compelling video of consumers really underlining the pain points. Voice of customer is huge. And third-party info sources, so that's what I'm working on with the students now. How can you get the information you need to make a journey if you're not going to be running online groups? There's so much information out there now on the interwebs that you can start to really make some great inferences, and you can use syndicated sources like Simmons to get at attitudes and feelings and behaviors, so you can kind of start to, and social listening. That's a huge source. So, stakeholder workshops, take your customer research from those, whatever source you used, and sit with your team and start to batch it out. You can use different colors to convey the different segments. That's another way to just visually start to see how the themes emerge. And the really powerful thing is if you do this with your cross-functional team, then they obviously are much more bought in to whatever result comes out of it, because they're seeing the actual verbatims, they're feeling the pain of the customer. You can start to model customer emotion. I don't have a lot of deep experience in this. I would just say it was more of a feeling, right? You see the comments from consumers, and it's more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Directional approach. So it looks very sort of quantitative up there, but it really is more, were they happy here or were they not, or were they somewhere in the middle? And after you finished all of that, you can kind of go back up and choose guiding principles. So in this case, I think this was a bank that I worked on with Catalyst. And the guiding principles were know me, remember me, make me feel special, help me succeed, always be there for me. And these loosely aligned with, sort of new customer, sustaining customer, upsell, cross-sell, help me succeed, show me the next level account that I need, and then always be there for me. So mobile, 24/7, etc. Okay. So in terms of frameworks, who is the priority segment? That's kind of your first, first priority. Who are you going after? You have to be really clear on that. What are their goals? What are their values? Their expectations? What do they expect for your brand, from your brand? When is the moment in the journey? And I didn't want to go too long, but the whole moment, the concept of moments is from Google Zymot. It's about, I don't know, 6 years old now. Think with Google, if you Google that, has a lot of great research on moments, customer moments, for different categories, depending on what category you're in. Okay, so that's the win. It's like what moment in the journey, and then what is the inventory of stories and experiences that you have to offer, and then how describes how you're going to deliver that experience, what systems, what processes, what data, and that will really help you define the programs and the priorities. And then hopefully if you set it all up right, it will also help you bring it all together cross-functionally. So if you've had that cross-functional team involved with you in your journey, through the journey, bringing everything together cross-functionally should be easier. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, what does a journey map look like? There are so many different looks, but the one that, sort of the model that Effective UI put out back in 2011, I think is still my favorite. It looks linear, and this is not Effective UI, this is Catalyst, but it's the same model. What I like is, even if it's not linear, once you roll it out like this, it's very easy to take action on. And so that was the problem I had with the conceptual maps, was just, I need a worksheet. I need to get down and dirty and be able to start loading things in. So what's fun about the sort of Effective UI model, and actually if you Google Effective UI, and it's a railway example from 2011, I feel like that is the one. I think Gartner even put that up, even though they have their own model, they put that up a year or two ago at a customer journey presentation that they gave, and I just thought that was funny. Like, has no one come up with a better example than the one from 2011? But this one is simple enough to kind of show how they lay out. So I'm going to put down my little thing. So you can see the stages going in the blue across. Then you can map out what your target is doing at each of those stages, like what are they physically doing. You can indicate whether that's something that they're repeating, if it's a linear process. You can use whatever coding works for you. Then from your research, you can start to plot, what are they thinking at each stage? What are they feeling? And the thinking is usually in the form of a question. I'm learning and I'm signing up for, what is this? This is the movie theater example. Will this program benefit me? Is the cost worth the benefit? These sort of questions. What are they thinking? And then what are they feeling? Maybe I'm a little excited at the prospect of having unlimited movie passes, or maybe I'm excited at the prospect of my mobile bank account, whatever it is. But you map out the feeling, and you can start to see, and different people will actually use the visuals even across, you'll start to see the flow of emotion, like super excited, and then somewhere in here it usually falls apart, right? There's some delivery of the brand doesn't happen, and you can usually identify your opportunity area, which you can capture sort of next level down. So it looks really linear, but it doesn't have to be. What I like about it is you can throw this in an Excel, and you can just kind of keep your notes, and you can keep building out. So when I worked with Butler Till, who was a media company, normally media wasn't a part of the journey, but I just added a row, and then started to think through, if this is the opportunity, what's the media that we would use to sort of deliver there? If you're a creative agency, you could take it further. What's the message that should be communicated at this stage versus this stage? So it just, for me, it was a very actionable way to capture a ton of information that was very customer-centric, and yet could let me think about all the different parts of my marketing program that that needed to come together. So frequently, and I'm thinking about a bank right now, marketers work in one area of the journey, right? Their acquisition, and that's all they care about. Their annual goal is based on, acquisition targets, and they're not really thinking about what happens after that. So if everyone is kind of looking at the same journey, then maybe the acquisition guy and the retention guy are more integrated, right? And they can start to think about making that a seamless connection for the consumer. Because obviously the consumer doesn't care about your different business divisions, they care about what they're trying to accomplish. So is that what you've worked with too, something similar to this?
Yeah, ours kind of, rather than maybe like prior to becoming a customer, we try and encapsulate A to Z. So ours is broken up into kind of how the idea of welcome me, meet me, onboarding, current customer, and then leaving. So we try and look at it across because we have products that we try and sell to our customer base, so we try and make sure that we aren't forgetting about the fact that after we sell them, we still want to sell them.
Correct.
So yeah, but we do set ours up in a linear fashion like this,
right,
with columns and rows.
And do you always feel compelled to say, no, we're not thinking linearly, but it's just, do you have advocacy as part of your model?
Probably not as much as we could.
Right. I think that was just left off a lot of models back in the day, and you see it a lot more. So after you've gone through all of this, so at the end you could have advocacy, and you can also have ending the relationship. And ending the relationship doesn't have to be, it is a bad thing, but end it well, right? So you can start to identify here, what was it like to end the relationship? Maybe that's where you start to build in win-back tactics and that sort of thing. So the way that the rows break down then is you have the stages, physical journey, sort of the mental journey, the emotional journey, opportunities, and then I say go crazy with whatever other elements you want to add down at the bottom. I don't see a ton of people doing it, but media, message, you can think of a lot of different ways that you could blow that out. And then you go back to the top, look at sort of what the themes are that are emerging, and the guiding principles can go along the top there. And then often you'll have like the one strategic shift idea that will culminate at the top. And I wish I could read that one. Yeah, so in this one it's making the shift from promoting movies to promoting the movie-going experience. And that's usually what it is. It's like Starbucks shifting from drinking a cup of joe to the European cafe experience. So that would be your sort of lofty goal there. Here's one that I sort of quickly mocked up for a telco when I was at Butler Till, sort of following the same model and using a lot of information that I just gleaned from various decks just to start to think along their journey. And I put in objectives, what the consumer objectives were. That was a change I made to that journey map. What the barriers were at each stage, what the opportunities were. And then I actually started to plot out kind of the media exposed journey. What media were they being exposed to at that time? And again, I think the creative agency added on message. The next thing I want to talk about is prioritizing the opportunities. For many organizations, it's enough just to have the map. But if you are in a position where you'll need to come up with something a little more quantitative at the end, you can do a scoring map where you would list all the different aspects of the journey on whatever matrix makes sense for you. Is it low cost, high cost, high customer benefit, low customer benefit? customer benefit should always be a piece of that matrix, but the other access can change. And then you can, actually, this one is strange with the top priority being on the left. I usually have it on the top right, but you kind of list them out, and it doesn't have to be super scientific, but it can help when you plot it this way. If cost is the thing, then you can really start to see where the stages fall out, where they're important to you. So final tips, journey map should depict the seamless experience of your customer and not how your company is set up. And I think that's the real value of the map, is getting all the, the different departments together to focus on the journey of the customer and not just their particular department or silo. Focus of a journey, it really is to keep the customer moving forward. What's the next best thing that they should be doing? It helps everyone visualize the touch points that need improving, and it really reflects the actual experience. I've seen some people do the future state journey map, which is tempting to do. I think that's one of those things that you would still want existing state to be the priority. Do that, get a good sense of where you're at, and then you can do a gap analysis and then map out the future state. I don't think I've actually done a future state. And then remember that the visual representation isn't as important as the content within. So I did spend a lot of time looking for sort of perfect model, but at the end of the day, you should spend the time looking for the best content that your time and resources allow. And then this is from Gartner. They said it was critical to prioritize your roadmap on 3 horizons. So one, the early horizon, the near horizon is triage, making sure that you have a strong foundation for the future. So people get really excited when they're journey mapping, and certainly if you're on the digital side of the house, there's so many shiny new toys all the time. So the example here is, if you don't have a CRM platform, then maybe look at that before you go rushing to how virtual reality can fit into your customer journey, right? Then Horizon 2 is look at your category and set a goal of how to best your peers. Are there touch points or moments on the map where you can better connect with customers than your peers can? Can you find places that they are lacking? So that's another row that you could actually build into your map, is your competitive advantage at that point. So maybe you've done a SWOT, you can start to pull in some of that insight into your map and identify stronger competitive positions. And then Horizon 3, looking beyond your category. So that's something that Catalyst helped this regional bank do. Looking outside the category, the website was a huge problem for this bank. It was like 1990s style in a world that had changed, and kind of looking at Amazon, looking at Target at the time, and this was several years ago, to find out what the bank's customers were used to in terms of an experience, right? You don't have to stay in your category, but rather think about what your user is expecting in terms of, in this case, the digital experience. So, kind of take a category that's relevant in some way, either has the same objectives you have or the same target audience, and then take a known or applied idea from that category and bring it into yours. And that's one way to kind of leapfrog the competition often. So, if you were healthcare, maybe you'd look at travel or transportation. If you were insurance, maybe you would look at what the highest end financial services folks are doing. And if you're financial services, I would definitely look at what Amazon's doing. or some other large retailer with large client databases. So everyone is really eager to stampede to that third horizon, and you should, but just remember to get the foundation in order first. And then prioritizing. So I showed you that scoring model. That's sort of one way to do it. But you don't have to be, as I mentioned before, scared off of starting journey mapping. I think it's just a good exercise to go through. If you can't run groups and take everybody out of work for 3 days, you could still map it out and start to think along those lines. So, first-party data is ideal, but you can use syndicated to get started. You can use social listening. I even got a Gartner journey expert to say, yeah, you can use your social listening because you can really get the questions and the sentiment out of that. Then, leave areas blank where there's no information. That's telling in itself, right? If you have no information on something, then the opportunity is research. So many don't use scoring models, as I mentioned. They just focus on identifying those experience gaps. And then kind of it becomes obvious where the big opportunities are. So I already mentioned this. It's hard to find a good, robust example that a company is willing to make public. Like I said, at that giant Gartner conference in San Diego, they still used the much socialized adaptive path model from 2011. Well, I said effective UI, it was adaptive path. So I still would definitely Google journey maps. Sometimes when I was working for the telecom company, I actually found a fabulous journey map of a cable customer that like a competitor had released at some conference, and it was right there on the internet. So, search and compare and find the model that works for you. I have many more that I've kind of squirreled away over the years, but that's pretty much, public service announcements. So I think we have Paychex, who is looking to build out their customer experience team. So I just said I would mention that if you knew anyone who are interested in working on things like this, to please come over here, and please say your name again.
Alana Stage.
Yes, Alana Stage from Paychex. So just thought I'd put that out there. Now it's on Facebook Live, so maybe you'll get a lot of...
Thank you.
And then the other public service announcement is the Science School has lots of graduate students, MBA and masters in marketing analytics who do projects. So in my MBA and MSMA digital strategy courses, we'll be doing journey mapping. If anyone is interested in having students work on projects, you can see me after this, because I just love to let everyone have hands-on experience with this. So maybe they can run groups for you or whatever. But thank you very much. Are there any questions? Lots of questions. Okay, we'll start here.
So I work in the local media industry here, and we're finding that probably over 50% of our business is small business in the area. And I'm intrigued by your steps here that can go, buy, own, and advocate.
Mm-hmm.
We usually stop at, the funnel, getting a customer to buy for this local business. So, I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for strategies that, we could maybe take to a small business with 5 to 10 employees and help them in the ownership or advocate stages.
Yeah.
Other than maybe, there's always email marketing, right? Staying in contact, but any other thoughts maybe?
And actually, in the bank project, the biggest problem, and it went right up to the guiding principles, the remember me, know me, love me, whatever it was the bank brought the consumers in, sign up for the free checking, and then almost dropped them like a hot potato, went back for more new customers, right? And all the customer wanted was acknowledgement, like, I'm here, I'm doing my thing, occasionally tell me something that's relevant about how I can, do something better, what's the next best thing I can do with you. kind of minimal expectations, but the bank was not meeting them. The obvious, one way to kind of start that dialogue about the own and the advocate is to find statistics, and I'm sorry I didn't have them in here, I have them somewhere, the cost to acquire a new customer, the ROI on keeping existing versus acquiring new. There are some very compelling stats that are repeated across categories that you can start out with. So get close to whatever client it is, get close to their category, and the information is out there. It's sort of like X-Files. The truth is out there. There are stats for whatever category to kind of show the value of the own and the advocate, like the value of earned media, for example. And so you can start there.
And then how do you take that to the next stage once they're on board with those principles? Do you have any sort of small scale, recommendations for
like what action that
you take? Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
So my observation is the action becomes clear. It kind of filters down to the opportunities once you've mapped everything out. I think often you'll see a number of areas where you're just not connecting with the consumer, or you saw in that touch point analysis, there's just nothing in a particular stage. Then you can say, great, we just broke this down. We're not trying to boil the ocean. We're going to focus on this stage. And again, say it's onboarding. Let's craft an onboarding strategy. And that's very manageable. That's very containable, doable. Yep.
So I'd say kind of some things too for you. It's staying connected with your customers. So even if it's through social media, looking if they have a problem, if they're posting, people post when they're angry or when they're really happy. There's
Right.
There's not a lot in that middle, but nurturing that middle part too, and not only reacting to the positive and negative, can help develop those relationships. Also, doing any kind of case study with your customers, that is showing that you still care about them, you're helping promote them. If they're looking to be promoted,
Well, that's a great idea.
that can be a huge thing to help build that relationship. That's going to get them excited, that's going to get them talking about you. It's that whole advocacy and delight stage.
Easy for you to say.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of doing things like that, I'd say, could be really beneficial. And it's, it's going to depend on that customer and what kind of their persona is, whether they want that exposure, whether they know this is very, the company I work for, all of our customers, they have, their data is theirs. They don't want anyone hearing about it. We're doing stuff that goes into DNA sequencing. They don't want anyone knowing how they do that. So we can't it's very hard to get someone to talk about that. But a lot of times with small businesses, they are all for just wanting to talk about it and help promote that.
Yeah, makes sense.
And knowing your line of business, like how I would suggest a route that maybe you could pitch this as like a product is thank you notes, postcards or some type of touch point for, hey, you became a customer a year ago, and celebrate your anniversary with us, some type of coupon, some type of collateral piece, some type of, just, again, she was mentioning that we still care about you type of touch point piece. Even that's our biggest thing. We to this day, it's not just your 5-person business. We absolutely struggle with this. How do you we thank people by offering them 82 more products to buy.
Right, exactly.
We don't do a great job of just being appreciative of the customers that we have. So I think social media is a fantastic idea. Even just, I think of like a baker or something like that, like taking pictures of their product and saying, thank you, and you can keep it fairly generic. Thank you, Bob, for this, ordering this cake. And you're showing off your product and you're showing appreciation for people that order. I think that's a fun way to do it. And then again, you can definitely tie some print product into that as well.
Yeah, and that would shake out from your voice of customer, right? So, the thinking and the feeling, right? So in the case of, this is reward me, give me a fair deal, make me feel good about it. But in this example, it's, recognize me, I want to, whatever. So it usually shakes out, and down in the opportunities, then you brainstorm with your team all these great ideas for how to address whatever issue it is.
Kind of on that vein, in my previous role, I ran an insurance agency, and what we did is we sent out handwritten happy birthday cards every month to our customers. We'd go to the bank and get shiny pennies in there and do that, and then a $1 scratch off. And I mean, we had 400 customers, so it probably, I mean, if you think about it, it cost around $500 a year after all in. But our retention numbers were always like the highest in the state, and a lot of our customers said that had a big factor, and it showed we cared.
Yeah, and these are all the really human examples that are great and oft forgotten, like the human touch examples. On the other end of the continuum are, you know, the giant systems that track your customer through all their entire journey, basically, and measure, use data, personalize the communications, but that's, again, at the automated level. And I think it's great to keep in mind that even if they want a digital bank, they still want a human when things go wrong, or a human to appreciate them on their birthday, or whatever it is. So it's a combination of technology and humanity, really. Any other questions or examples? Yeah.
I had a thought and a question. So on the future state journey mapping, one of the things that I found super interesting, I've done a bit of future state, is kind of the current state with like Post-it notes, and then using different colors, things like that. I saw you had a Post-it note example there, but identifying critical processes that can't be lost in the future state, and then kind of taking a picture of it and then using those Post-its to guide your future state mapping as well, so that you're not losing any critical points in your pack.
I love that.
So that we can kind of drag and drop and move things around and have a visual representation for people.
Yeah.
And my second was a question. So in terms of kind of measuring feeling, so what I'm measuring, I implement CRM and marketing automation platform for higher ed, so admissions departments and marketing departments with colleges. So one thing that I struggle is when do I measure that feeling? So if I measure during, no one's happy implementing new technology. If I measure after, they might be a little happier, or they've got those, you know, rose-colored glasses of we're finally done. And if you measure too late, then you've lost a lot of the
benchmarking.
real, yeah. So do you have any thoughts on like when is the right time to do that? Because no one's going to take your survey 3 times, right? No one's going to take that survey or like have that conversation, you know, a dozen times through the process.
You're not the same
Right.
person. So I'm thinking in things that I've worked on, there's been a large enough pool that you wouldn't hit the same person, but you could hit a similar person, right? Yeah. So it's like, oh, that is an interesting question. I mean, and again, website redesign, that bank had a huge issue, and we did a fantastic redesign, right? But I think I had engaged 4C to do the surveying, and I benchmarked, it's like a pop-up on the site. So we benchmarked, and results were terrible with the old site. So that was gratifying. Nice low bar, so we can't go wrong. But rookie mistake. We relaunched and surveyed again, and we went right. The scores dropped. Well, of course they dropped because the existing customers couldn't. They had to reorient. So even though it was a far superior site, your scores are going to drop. So to your point, it is important to figure that out, know your category, and but I mean, I'm a big fan of doing it super early so that you have your baseline. I think the answer is always it depends,
Right.
Or try everything, see what works. So, sorry, I don't have much experience in the measurement part. Not at the super high automated level, nor at the small business level. So that's something I'm looking forward to learning about. Anybody else have?
It sounds like in that case, if you start early enough, you can map out those emotions as they transition to a new website. You can map out their emotions, and then as that climbs, you can map that whole thing out to the end, where it drops back down, but you can see then that peak, where do they peak? You know, how far out from launch does that peak happen? How long does the learning
Well, you could
curve
have
take?
a live
Because-
journey map.
You should be able to map out the emotion to the learning curve.
Right, right, yeah, and that live thing, that's, and taking those together, that's kind of what we're trying to do, is like,
Mhm.
so I have weekly meetings, no, just weekly kind of stand-ups with each client and kind of getting a gut check each week, where are you?
Yeah.
But that's not data, right, like that's like this weird, like, how does someone feel in the moment versus like a real survey, and like,
Right.
it gets this weird, like, but maybe you have a good relationship with those people, so of course they're going to tell, you know, so it's like,
Yeah.
it's skewed because you're having a good conversation at that time.
Yeah.
So it's always kind of a weird, like, is it a true measurement if you're doing it that way, but,
Yeah.
yeah,
And does it need to be a true measurement?
well, that's,
So, I mean, I think that's the real thing is, and especially now working at Simon, where data is, you know, data analytics are huge, and it's very quant heavy, but just don't forget voice of the customer,
Mhm.
right? I mean, sometimes that is just so powerful. Look at the data to sort of validate, but it's, I think, often better to be data validated than data driven. But that's just my personal, right? Any other questions or great examples that I can learn from and take to my students?
We do a lot of surveys. For better or worse, we survey the crap out of people. But we try and make sure that it's, and you guys, if you've ever gotten like a Starbucks survey, like how would you rate this transaction? I think that's a differentiator when you're thinking about surveys, like try and get someone to focus on one exact thing. So we survey right after onboarding, we survey after if there's a problem, and a customer service interaction. And then as far as our kind of like loyalty, like just how are you enjoying the relationship, we try and divide up and make sure that we're not hitting the same group. So we divide our base by 12s and hit, so we're only getting it once, theoretically every 12 years. So obviously like our customer base is able to sort of support that besides the customer base.
right.
But you can always choose whatever makes sense for the size of your base. So if you were saying like, all right, we're gonna do a loyalty survey, to a fourth and make sure that we don't overlap in that fourth and make that, I think a big part of it is the fatiguing rule, just set a cadence that you're not maybe sending a survey, so we
And you
base
can
ours.
tell, I mean, wear out by the response rates dropping, you know.
Yeah.
So again, it's a little bit of trial and error when it's a new, blazing a new
Right.
trail.
Yeah, so we survey a lot. I don't think people get too tired of them. I mean, I'll do those Starbucks ones all the time. They're gonna give me points on my card.
Yeah, right, right.
I know, I was wondering if it's just because I care about the poor marketer on the other side. I'm like, of course I'll do the survey. But maybe not.
I have that thought pretty frequently.
Yeah.
Some intern is like.
I'm gonna just pay it forward. Yeah. So, anybody else have examples to share? All right. Well, thank you very much.